Welcome to the Inland Valley Storytellers. My name is John St. Clair, and I'm the leader of this group, and we are having our monthly story swap meeting here at the historic Garner House in Claremont in the Ginger Elliott Art Exhibition and Conference Center. And I'm going to start by just making an announcement. Maybe I should do it at the end too, but I have confirmed that for the months of July and August, we will not be meeting here on Monday nights because that's when the city of Claremont has their concerts, which are right next to this room, and it would be way too loud. So for July and August, we're meeting the second Tuesday of those months. And hopefully that works. I mean, we used to meet on, yeah, we'll be here, but not on the night when the concerts were. So, huh? Second Tuesday. Second Tuesday. Okay. So, I have a story to tell.
We're glad.
You know? Okay. Well, I'll tell more than one story if you want.
Yeah.
So there's one story I really wanted to practice because this story, I think, is a story I'm going to use at the Bay Area Storytelling Festival in June. I'm one of the showcase storytellers from SAC. I applied to perform at the Bay Area Storytelling Festival and they accepted me. So I'd like to practice this story. And it is a folk tale from Serbia. Long, long ago, in a place not here, but far away, there was a king who was pacing back and forth in the hallway. And the reason he was pacing is because his wife, the queen, was in the royal chambers delivering a baby. It was to be their first baby. And he was very nervous and was pacing up and down. And finally, the door opened and the midwife said, "Your Majesty, you have a beautiful baby boy," but he didn't listen to what came afterwards. He went rushing into the room to see the baby and didn't get to hear the rest of what the midwife was going to say. And the queen was holding the baby and she said, "He's a beautiful baby boy, but..." And again, he grabbed the baby and held the baby boy up and said, "What a beautiful baby boy." And the baby was all wrapped up in blankets. And he couldn't really see the whole head. He wanted to see whether the baby boy had hair or not, because sometimes some babies have a lot of hair and some don't. So he took the blanket off the head. And when he did that, ears popped up, kind of like donkey ears. And he gasped. And the midwife said, "Your Majesty, don't worry. Sometimes they grow out of these things. It happens sometimes." The king said, "We can't have this. We can't let anybody know that our son, the prince, has the ears of a donkey. How would he have any respect from the subjects in our kingdom? They would laugh at him. They wouldn't respect him. We want him to eventually grow up to be the next king and take over ruling the kingdom, and it wouldn't work." So the king and the queen planned out what they were going to do. First of all, they gave the midwife a bag of gold to pay for her silence. And then they sent her out with instructions written out to give to some of his guards to escort her to another kingdom where she could live comfortably and keep the secret. Secondly, they decided that there was going to be no nursemaid. The queen was going to nurse the baby and the queen was going to take care of the baby. Not something that queens usually do, but this queen was willing to sacrifice for her son to keep the secret. And it worked. Nobody found out. And the midwife was wrong. The young prince did not grow out of the ears. The ears continued to grow as the prince grew. And so what they had to do, they kept fitting the young prince with larger and larger crowns that were specially built to kind of hide the ears folded over on top of his head. And it worked. And as he grew up, he developed quite naturally. He grew up to be a strong, intelligent, kind young man, and nobody knew about his ears. Well, another thing that they had to do is the queen had to cut his hair. They couldn't have a royal barber cut the prince's hair because then he'd find out about the ears. So the queen would cut his hair, and they kept fitting crowns to fit his head to hide his ears. And eventually he became a young man, and he was strong and intelligent, and his parents were aging, and finally they passed away. And so the young prince was now a young king, and he still had the secret. But there was a problem. After about 6 months, his hair was getting too long. And so he called the royal barber, who had never cut his hair, into the private room to cut his hair. And when he took off the crown, his ears stuck up, and the barber gasped, but he didn't say anything. And he proceeded to cut the king's hair. And when he finished, the king said, "Now, do you notice anything unusual?" And the barber said, "Well, your Majesty, I couldn't help but notice that you have the ears of a donkey." Well, the king picked up a sword and chopped off his head, put his crown back on, had the guards come in and remove the body and the head. 6 months later or so, he needed another haircut. And the same thing happened. And after a couple of years, the kingdom was running out of barbers. And there was only one barber left in the kingdom. And this barber was far away from the palace, a whole day's journey to get to the palace. And he was old. And so the king sent some guards to escort him to come to the palace to cut his hair. But when they got there, the old barber was sick. He was not feeling well, and he said, "I can't make the journey to the palace. I don't feel well. I'll send my apprentice instead." And he had a young 13-year-old apprentice who he had been training, and the young boy said, "What do you think? I'm good enough to cut the king's hair?" And the old barber said, "Yes, you're good enough. I've trained you well. Take your barber tools and go to the palace and cut the king's hair." And so he did. And when he came into the private room where the king was waiting to get his hair cut, the king said, "What? Who sent a child to cut my hair? Are you sure you are capable of cutting my hair?" And the boy said, "Yes, your Majesty, yes, I've been well trained. My mentor barber is excellent, and he's trained me well. I can cut your hair." "Okay." So he took off his crown, and of course the ears popped up. And the boy kind of smiled because he had heard a tale, kind of a folk tale about knights that when they slayed a dragon or rescued someone, every time that happened, their ears grew a little bit. And so big ears were indication of bravery and of brave acts that had been done. So the young barber didn't think of those ears negatively. He thought, boy, this king must have done a lot of brave acts in his life. And so he went ahead and cut the hair of the king. And when the haircut was done, the king said, "Now, do you notice anything unusual about me?" And the boy said, no, I think you look great with this haircut." And the king smiled and said, "That's a good answer." And he said, "I like you. I think I'm going to keep you as my personal barber as long as you pledge to me, promise to me, you will keep the secret about my ears. You will get to keep your head. Otherwise, I will have your head cut off if you divulge the secret of my ears to anybody. And the young boy said, I can do that. And so the king really grew to like this young barber. And when he was getting his hair cut, he would sometimes talk about problems in the kingdom. And the young boy would sometimes have very helpful answers that, are suggestions of how to deal with a problem. And the king really developed a close relationship. And the boy was no longer a young teenager, and he was becoming a young man. And the king was confiding in him more and more, and actually using him not just as a barber, but as an advisor as well. And so things are going quite well, except for one thing. Have you ever tried to keep a secret from everyone? It's not easy. And the boy started worrying that maybe he would blurt it out to someone in a moment of weakness and forget that he had to keep the secret. And that worry started to affect his health. He started, from the stress of worrying, he started to feel bad, and he had trouble sleeping at night, and he ended up actually being bedridden. And so his mentor, Barber, heard that his protege, his young apprentice, who was now a young man, was very ill. So he made the long trek, even though he was quite old now, to visit and said, what's the matter, my son? And the boy said, I have a secret I can't tell anyone, and it's killing me. And the old man said, well, you can tell me, you can trust me. Oh, no. If I tell you the secret, then you'll have the burden, and if you blurt out the secret, we'll both get our heads chopped off. Oh, said the old barber. Okay, I don't want to hear it. Well, why don't you go tell the priest? No, I can't tell anyone. And then the old barber said, when I was a young boy, my mother once told me that if I had a secret that I was having a hard time keeping, but I knew I couldn't tell it to anybody, what I should do is go out into the forest, dig a hole in the ground, and tell the secret into the ground and then bury it up. And just the thought of doing that made the young man feel a little bit lighter. He said, okay, I'm going to try that. And he slept better that night. He actually got a good night's sleep. In the morning, he found a shovel. He went out into the forest. He dug a hole, and he said into the hole, the king has the ears of a donkey. And then he buried it. And he felt much better. He walked back to the castle twice as fast as he walked out to the forest. He was feeling better already. And so the magic of doing that helped him was also happening with what he had set into the ground. Because after he left, a willow tree sprouted, and overnight it grew to be 20 feet tall. And that next morning, some young children were out in the forest, and they were hunting for a willow tree to cut branches out to make little penny whistles, because they work very well for that. And they saw this willow tree, and they cut up and prepared and made these penny whistles and brought them into town and sold them. But when people blew on the penny whistle, it didn't play a tune, it sang a tune. And it went like this. The king has the ears of the donkey. The king has the ears of the donkey. Well, the king went out onto his balcony at lunchtime, or maybe it was afternoon tea, enjoying the scenery, and he heard some singing. And it was happening in lots of places around. And one of the flute player or penny whistle players was coming towards where the king was, to where he could hear. The king has the ears of a donkey. The king has the ears of a donkey. And the king was furious because there was only one way that could happen as far as he believed, and that was his barber and advisor had broken his promise. And he was mad. So he sent his guards to find the barber, the young man, and bring him to him. And when he was brought to the king said, "You betrayed me. You betrayed me. You promised to keep the secret. Now everyone knows." And the young man said, "But your majesty, I didn't tell anybody. Honestly, I didn't tell anybody. All I did was I went out into the forest and I told the secret into the ground and I buried it. I didn't tell a single soul." Well, the king had developed a relationship with this young man, and he really liked him. And he wanted to believe, but it sounded kind of unbelievable. But he said, "Okay, show me." So the young man took the king out into the forest, and when he got to the spot, the young man said, What has happened? This was an empty piece of ground. There was no tree here when I dug the hole." And so the king took out his knife and he cut off a branch and he whittled it into a whistle and he blew on it. And sure enough, it didn't play a tune, it sang, "The king has the ears of a donkey. The king has the ears of a donkey." And so the king realized that the young man was telling the truth. He hadn't told anybody. And he also realized what a serious burden he had put on this young man to keep this secret. And he also realized that maybe it was time to not keep the secret and just let everyone know and let his ears show. He had been a king for several years, and except for the fact that he had executed all the barbers, he was a very good king. There were quite a few widows of barbers who didn't like him, but everybody else liked him. And he ruled justly and was intelligent and made good decisions. And so he didn't cover up his ears when they walked back to the castle. And he was walking arm in arm with the young man. And people saw him. Some of them giggled. Some of them whispered things about him. But eventually, everybody accepted the fact that their king had very large ears like a donkey. And even though he did, he was still a good king. And he even gave reparations to the widows to make sure that they were well provided for, even though they had lost their husbands. And he ruled for a long time. And his kingdom was prosperous. But he didn't have any kids. I don't know, maybe it was hard to find a woman that would like a man with ears of a donkey. Or he felt self-conscious, so he never really attempted to find a queen. But he decided as he was nearing the end of his life that he wanted the kingdom to go to his barber and advisor. And so he passed on the throne to the barber advisor, who was no longer a young man, he was middle-aged as well. And through this whole process, the kingdom continued to prosper because everyone had learned an important lesson, and that lesson is you don't judge a person by their looks. You judge a person by the quality of their character. The King's Ears, a folktale concern. Okay, we had somebody else join here. Adrian did. Hi, Adrian. Do you have a story for us? She does. Okay, well, unmute yourself. And I'm going to put the computer on a chair now.
Okay, so you want me to go next?
Yeah, would you go next, Adrian?
Sure.
And introduce yourself because we have a new person here.
Okay. Well, okay, let me put my headphones on so that it's a little easier to hear me. I'm sitting outside the lovely Yorba Linda Public Library. So hang on a second. Let me get you in my headphones here, and then you can hear me a little bit better.
Well, and I'm also going to put you on the spotlight.
Okay.
There we
So, okay. And let's see. Connect. All right, connecting. Go on. Let's see. It's thinking about it. Hang on a second. Okay, hang on.
trying to get the headphones.
All right, hang on a second. There we go. Okay. So say something to me, Jen.
How are the headphones
Okay.
working?
Yeah, there we go. All right, awesome. Okay. So I full disclosure, I don't necessarily have this fully memorized because I just recently got my hands on it. And so I got a little cheat sheet, but one of my students was working on this, and it's a story from Bulgaria and having to do with some of the how shall we say, folk remedies that are often employed. And the story is called Blood. Few customers visited my shop, perhaps 3 or 4 people a day. They watch the animals in the cages that seldom buy them. The room is narrow, there's no place for me behind the counter, so I usually sit in my old moth-eaten chair beside the door. For hours, I stare at the frogs, lizards, snakes, and insects which wriggle under thick yellowish plates of glass. Teachers come and take frogs for their biology lessons. Fishermen drop in to buy some kind of bait. That's practically all. Soon I'll have to close my shop and I'll be sorry about it. For the sleepy, gloomy smell of formaldehyde is always giving me peace and an odd feeling of home. I've worked here for 5 years now. One day, a strange, small woman entered my room. Her face looked frightened and gray. She approached me, her arms trembling, unnaturally pale, resembling 2 dead white fish in the dark. The woman did not look at me, nor did she say anything. Her elbows reeled, searching for support on the wooden counter. It seemed she had not come to buy lizards or snails. Perhaps she had simply felt unwell and looked for help at the first open door she happened to notice. I was afraid she would fall and took her by the hand. She remained silent and rubbed her lips with a handkerchief. I was at a loss. It was very quiet and dark in the shop. Have you moles here? She suddenly asked. Then I saw her eyes. They resembled old torn cobwebs with a little spider in the center, the pupil. Moles? I muttered. I had to tell her I never had sold moles in the shop and had never seen one in my life. The woman wanted to hear something else, an affirmation. I knew it by her eyes, by the timid stir of her fingers that reached out to touch me. I felt uneasy staring at her. I have no moles, I said. She turned to go, silent and crushed, her head drooping between her shoulders. Her steps were short and uncertain. Hey, wait, I shouted. Maybe I have some moles. I don't know why I acted like this. Her body jerked and there was pain in her eyes. I felt bad because I couldn't help her. The blood of a mole can cure sick people, she whispered. You only have to drink 3 drops of it. I was scared. I could feel something evil lurking in the dark. It eases the pain, at least, she went on dreamily. her voice thinning into a sob. Are you ill? I asked. The words whizzed by like a shot in the thick, moist air and made her body shake. I'm sorry. My son is ill. Her transparent lids hid the faint, desperate glitter of her glance. Her hands lay numb on the counter, lifeless like firewood. Her narrow shoulders looked narrower in their frayed gray coat. A glass of water will make you feel better, I said. She remained motionless, and when her fingers grabbed the glass, her eyelids were still closed. She turned to go, small and frail, her back hunching, her steps noiseless and impotent in the dark. I ran after her. I had made up my mind. I'll give you blood of a mole, I shouted. The woman stopped in her tracks and covered her face with her hands. It was unbearable to look at her. I felt empty. The eyes of the lizard sparkled like pieces of broken glass. I didn't have any mole's blood. I didn't have any moles. I imagined the woman in the room sobbing. Perhaps she was still holding her face with her hands. Well, I closed the door so that she could not see me. Then I cut my left wrist with a knife. The wound bled and slowly oozed into a little glass bottle. After 10 drops had covered the bottom, I opened the door to where the woman was waiting for me. Here it is, I said. Here's the blood of a mole. She didn't reply. She just stared at my left wrist. The wound still bled slightly, so I thrust my arm under my apron. The woman glanced at me and kept silent. She did not reach for the glass bottle. Rather, she turned and hurried toward the door. I overtook her and forced the bottle into her hands. It's blood of a mole. She fingered the transparent bottle. The blood inside sparkled like dying fire. Then she took some money out of her pocket. No, no, I said. Her head hung low. She threw the money on the counter and did not say a word. I wanted to accompany her to the corner. I even poured another glass of water, but she would not wait. The shop was empty again, and the eyes of the lizard still glittered like wet pieces of broken glass. Cold, uneventful days slipped by. The autumn leaves whirled hopelessly in the wind, giving the air a brown appearance. The early winter blizzards hurled snowflakes against the windows and sang in my veins. I could not forget that woman. I'd lied to her. No one entered my shop, and in the quiet dusk, I tried to imagine what her son looked like. The ground was frozen, the streets were deserted, and the winter tied its icy knot around houses, souls, and rocks. One morning, the door of my shop opened abruptly. The same small gray woman entered, and before I had time to greet her, she rushed and embraced me. Her shoulders were weightless and frail, and tears were streaking her delicately wrinkled cheeks. Her whole body shook, and I thought she would collapse, so I caught her trembling arms. Then the woman grabbed my left hand and lifted it up to her eyes. The scar of the wound had vanished, but she found the place. Her lips kissed my wrist. Her tears made my skin warm. Suddenly it felt cozy and quiet in the shop. He walks, the woman sobbed, hiding a tearful smile behind her palms. He walks. She wanted to give me money. Her big black bag was full of different things that she had brought for me. I could feel the woman had braced herself up. Her fingers had become tough and stubborn. I accompanied her to the corner, but she only stayed there beside the street lamp, looking at me, small and smiling in the cold. It was so cozy in my dark shop, and the old, imperceptible smell of formalin made me dizzy and with happiness. My lizards were so beautiful that I loved them as if they were my children. In the afternoon of the same day, a strange man entered the room. He was tall, scraggly, and frightened. Have you The blood of a mole? He asked, his eyes piercing through me. I was scared. No, I haven't. I have never sold moles here. Oh, you have. You have. 3 drops, no more. My wife will die. You have. Please. He squeezed my arm. Please, 3 drops or she will die. My blood trickled slowly from the wound. The man held a little bottle and the red drops gleamed in it like embers. Then he left and a little bundle of banknotes rolled on the counter. On the following morning, a great whispering mob of strangers waited for me in front of my door. Their hands clutched little glass bottles. Blood of a mole! Blood of a mole! They shouted, shrieked, and pushed each other. Everyone had a sick person at home and a knife in his hand.
Is that the end?
That's the end. That's by the Bulgarian writer oh gee, I'm not going to do justice to her name. Zdravka Evtimova. Yeah, Evtimova. It's a Bulgarian writer. So
And is this writer alive now, or is this from the past?
let's see. I get the sense, let me double check because I think this is somebody who is relatively contemporary. Let me double check something. Because I looked her up once I got kind of caught on this story. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, actually. Yeah, it looks like she's still, yeah, she's still alive and kicking. And writing. So she's sort of translating these Bulgarian folk stories.
So she takes Bulgarian folktales and translates them to English?
Looks like it. Yeah, I think that's part of what she does. So I didn't have a chance to really research her in depth, but some of it looks like she's got well, and this is where it's not so much a folk tale as it is a story of how these folk remedies take hold as part of the sort of the culture. And so she uses that in order to write these stories that have some interesting twists.
You know, at first I thought you were saying with a D,
Huh?
but it was mole, M-O-L-E.
Mole. Yeah, mold.
Yeah.
Yeah, mold. Yeah.
His name again?
Sorry?
What was the writer's name again?
Oh, I'll have to put it in the chat because yeah, you won't get it from my saying it. Let's see. And there we go. Okay, it's in the chat. Zdravka Evtimova. Yeah. So you'll be able to get that from the chat.
Barbara. No, I'm just trying to open the chat. So you can see.
Oh, the ZD, Z and zebra, D is in dark. Ravka, Zdravka Evtimova, Evtimova.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that one's called Blood.
You do have a knack of finding these rather dramatic stories.
Yeah. Well, I kind of like these things that just make you think because, you know, you have a character, a narrator who has these good impulses, but not sure that's always going to turn out okay for her.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna take the spotlight off of you and put it on me.
So we were expecting Ron Chick, but I guess he isn't gonna be here. And it's not. So I'd like to fit in another story.
Melissa,
Okay, so. Trying to think of what story to have done here for a while. And you weren't there at the fair to hear all the stories I told there. Well, how about the storyteller and the samurai? Would you mind hearing that? Okay, so this is a folktale from Japan. It's called The Storyteller and the Samurai. Long, long ago, an old storyteller, a master at his art, was making his way through the countryside. And it was getting later in the day, and the sun was beginning to get lower in the sky, and he felt a rumbling in his stomach, which reminded him that he was hungry, and his muscles were getting tired of walking, and he knew he needed to find a place to spend the night and hopefully some food to eat. And his prayers were answered quite soon, because there at the side of the road was a little path leading up a small hill, and on top of this small hill was a dojo, a school of swordsmanship, where young aspiring samurai would come to study under a master swordsman. And in those days, there was a custom that if you agreed to fight a duel with a student, you could earn a free meal and a free night's lodging. So he left the main road and started walking up the path to the door, but then he stopped and he realized as he was walking uphill, he was quite old and feeble, and a duel with even the youngest, weakest, least skilled student swordsman would probably not go well. And so he stopped and was disappointed. But then he got an idea and he walked up all the way and he knocked on the door. Well, the door opened and there stood a tall, handsome young man who said, "Grandfather, what can I do for you?" And the old storyteller said, "I would like to challenge the master swordsman to a duel." "Oh, no, grandfather, you don't want to do that. How about challenging a first-year student?" "No," said the storyteller, "I want to challenge the master swordsman." "No, no. How about a second-year student?" "I insist," said the old storyteller. "I am challenging the master swordsman of this dojo." "Okay," said the young man, "follow me." And so he led the old storyteller into the building, and they went into this large open room where the students would practice dueling with each other. And the young man that escorted the storyteller in announced, "This man has challenged the master swordsman to a duel. Would someone please go get him and inform him?" And so someone left to go get master swordsman, and everybody else just stared at the old man in disbelief, because you see, the custom was if you fought a duel with a student, you fought with wooden swords. But if you fought a duel with a master swordsman, you fought with swords of steel. And the loser would often be injured and sometimes killed. And they couldn't believe that this feeble old man would challenge the master swordsman. Well, it didn't take long for the master swordsman to make it to the practice hall, and he motioned for one of the students to take a sword to the storyteller, and the storyteller took it, but he set it on the ground and stood up and smiled right at the master swordsman, but didn't say anything. There was a moment of awkward silence. And then the master swordsman announced, "I accept your challenge, pick up your sword, and we will begin the duel." But the storyteller did not pick up his sword. Instead, he started telling a story. Long ago, there was a small village at the foot of a mighty, majestic mountain. And out of that mountain came a beautiful stream that went through the village. And at the edge of the village, there was a small cabin where an old man lived. And every morning, he would get up early before the sun rose, and he would go down to the stream, and he would listen to the fish tell him stories about where they had been and what they had done and people they had seen. And then after a while, he would go into the village to have some tea with his friends and share those stories he heard. Well, as the storyteller was telling the story, a strange thing happened. The master swordsman lowered his sword and announced, "I surrender. You have defeated me." "What?" said the students. "What? How did he defeat you? He didn't strike a single blow. He didn't even pick up his sword. How could he have possibly beaten you?" And the master swordsman smiled. And he looked at his students and he said, "How many times have I told you the importance of staying in the here and now, staying in the presence, the place? This man has taken to me to a place far away and a time long ago. He completely ruined my focus. He could have slain me at will." And so it was that the old storyteller got a free meal and a free night's lodging because of the power of story.
Did you get that one?
So that story I got from the book called Elder Tales, published by Dan Ketting. And the subtitle was Tales of Wisdom from Around the World, or folk tales from around. And the title was Elder Tales. And it's a great source of stories. I get a lot of stories from there. Okay, so Adrian, I made an announcement at the beginning. We're not meeting on the third Monday in July and August because during the summer, the city of Claremont has their outdoor concert series on Monday.
Ah,
And it's in the park right here where we are, right next to where. So I have arranged and confirmed that in July and August, we will meet here on the second Tuesday of those months.
oh, okay.
So mark your calendar.
Sort of back to our old
Yeah, our
time
old
slot.
was the second.
Yeah. Okay. So second Tuesday for
Just
July and
August.
August. Okay.
Just
All
the-
right.
And then we'll go back to the third month.
Okay. All right.
And as far as announcements go, other announcements, the Bay Area Storytelling Festival is July 20th and 21st in Santa Rosa, California, and I will be telling a story there.
Okay.
It's July, okay, I'm sorry, June 20th and 21st. Sorry about that. Yeah,
Oh.
June 20th and 21st. I had to.
Do you know what story you're gonna do yet?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do the King's Ears, the folktale from Serbia that I told first. Did you hear that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so you
Yeah.
could join the Zoom session.
Yeah. I think I heard you tell it once before, so I kind of remembered. Yeah. So,
I
okay.
told it in the 2022 joint celebration we did
Mm-hmm.
with one of the Northern California groups.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know that we have any other announcements. So this will be a short meeting. We just didn't have very many people show up.
Okay.
We had a new person join.
Is that Melissa?
That's,
Yeah, Melissa, do you want to tell Adrian where you're from?
I'm Melissa Chadburn. I'm joining you from Wrightwood. I
Okay.
teach at Claremont I teach at Pitzer Claremont.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Tell her what you teach, because Adrian also is kind
I
of.
teach creative writing.
Okay.
I'm an author. I write fiction and nonfiction, and I'm a recovering journalist. So I still teach journalism a little bit, but I teach creative writing and fiction and auto theory and nonfiction. Mhm.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I did my fair share of that at the university level too. So
yeah.
yeah, I like that level of student body. It's just in that cusp
Mhm.
between youth and adulthood and all the ideas that are brewing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um,
Yeah.
so I was just curious, since it's my first time joining you all, so you tell other people's stories. You're like, it's part of like a storytelling. I didn't know if you told your own stories or like it's part of I guess an oral narrative tradition where you're telling other or folk
I've
tales.
I've told some autobiographical stories kind of based upon
Mhm.
um my family and various things. I think others have done a little bit of that. So we
I
do
just didn't
some
know
of that.
what the parameters were, or like, like, is there a general time frame that you like to stick to per story? And I was just curious.
Usually 10 to 12 minutes.
Mhm.
Sometimes, if we don't have a lot of people show up that have stories, we can have people tell longer stories. But let me tell you a little bit about the structure
Mhm.
of the storytelling community that we belong to. There
Mhm.
is a national organization called the National Storytelling Network, and it's storynet.org is their website. And our group, the Inland Valley Storytellers, is an affiliate. We pay $100 a year to be a member of the National Storytelling Network. We also belong to the Storytelling Association of California, uh, and the uh, the short abbreviation for that is SAC. And I
Mhm.
believe the web address for SAC is sac.org, but sac.org, but I'm not sure. But you can go on our website, we have links to the SAC website as well as to the National Storytelling Network website on our website. And SAC does a monthly series. It's a genre series, and so there are many different genres. There, my thing is folk tales from around the world, but there also are personal stories. There are tall tales. There are historical stories.
Mhm.
There are scary stories, yeah, like for Halloween. Uh, what are the other categories? But every month, except for November, they have a different genre. And
Mhm.
uh, the leaders of the various storytelling groups, like ours, uh, will nominate members of our group who are interested in performing in this uh, genre series. It's all Zoom, so it's storytellers from all over California, and you get paid for doing it. But if you aren't a member of SAC, the first time you tell, your fee goes to pay for your membership. After that, you actually can pocket them. But it's a way for them to expand their membership. But yeah, there are different kinds of stories, and in our group, Nick isn't here. He usually is here, and he loves telling historical stories. He's a retired librarian. He loves to research real events and real people, and then he fills in the holes and tells a story about it.
And he has such a dry sense of humor that that the sort of the punchline of these real stories just sneaks right up to you. And his delivery is absolutely fabulous. I put the Storytelling Association of California website in the chat. It's www.storysac, but that's SAAC .org. What's the second A about? I don't know. Anyway,
That's
but
weird.
yeah.
And then is the other parameter that it's completely off book, or do people use index cards, or are there?
Oh, no. The stories, when you're performing, they have to be memorized.
Mhm.
Now, we sometimes allow people on our story swap meetings
Right.
to have notes, but usually most of us tell it from memory.
Yeah.
Mhm. There was just so much like lyricism in your story, Adrian, like the wet pieces of broken glass, and so I was like thinking, I was holding on to that for sure. I mean, I'm very sensitive to, I'm very interested in mouthfeel, so I
Yeah, the imagery is very vivid in there. And I will say I was cheating a little bit because I had just gotten my hands on the story. So I had sort of like the frame of it and sort of the feel of it, but some of the details I needed to remind myself. So that's one of the benefits of doing it on Zoom is as I'm working on a story, I can kind of prompt myself a little bit with some of the details. But yeah, when we're performing live in front of people off book,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah,
Thanks.
so it's a mixture, and I think that's one of the gifts of this particular group is that we're sort of not only keeping alive a lot of traditional kinds of stories, but reviving interests in things that are little known things, historical things. But Ron Evans does
Oh, yeah.
biographical stories, and his
Mhm.
biographical stories are just, and he tells them, he's such a wag. He tells them with such relish when when it's like something that you're going to find out is rather dastardly, or he has these little devilish moments of, well, I'd tell you that if I had the time. And then he'll launch into the side trail, and you're like, I guess you had the time. So he does these fabulous things, and he's a retired pastor, so he's got a lot of background in public speaking, but just his stories are always biographical with a bit of a wink and a nod, and he doesn't always tell you who the person is until you get to the end, and it's like, I didn't know those things about that historical person. So yeah, so we have a nice variety. And then oh gosh, John, what's her name? Elena, is it? She often does like Romanian folk tales from her part of the world. Am I remembering her name? Eleanor? Elena?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And she'll often tell tales from Central Europe, kind of where she grew up. And
And
she does.
Ron Chick is like me. He loves folk tales from all over. So yeah, we have a very group of storytellers. And so there are a lot of storytelling festivals all over the United States. And there are professional storytellers who do the circuit, and they make their living going from festival to festival to festival. And I mentioned the Bay Area Festival. It's a 2-day festival. there was a festival in Vista, California, the Southern California Story Swap Festival. There's a big festival in Utah called the Timpanogos Storytelling Festival. That will be in September, I believe. And then November, not November, October, the first weekend of October is the National Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro, Tennessee. And 10,000 people descend on Little Jonesboro, Tennessee every year to hear storytellers from not only the United States, but they bring in storytellers from abroad as well. And some of my very favorite storytellers are ones from Ireland and others from the United Kingdom. I would go anywhere to hear those two storytellers.
And they have a rich vein of Southern storytellers.
Yes.
The I mean, one of my favorites is Bill Lepp. I mean, yeah. So
Well,
there's a whole, what's that?
he tells tall tales. He's won the Liars contest many times in West Virginia.
Yeah. And there's also a couple of storytellers, a woman in particular who does a lot of Native American folklore, and it's just magical.
Yeah,
Um,
there's a number of Native American storytellers.
yeah. So
And some storytellers play music with their
mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, as did our dear Angela, may she rest in peace. Often did her storytelling kind of with some folk music to go with, and playing auto harp and things, and just amazing making those things relevant in a contemporary way. You think of those as like, oh, that's old fashioned. It's like, no, she knew how to make it relevant in a very contemporary way.
on our website, I still have pictures of Angela saying we miss her. So Melissa, one of our best storytellers who was on the national circuit, died in January, quite unexpectedly. And it was a shock to the whole storytelling community. We miss her very much. She was an
Yeah.
incredible storyteller.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
So you probably saw her picture on our website.
I did, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
how lucky were we to have somebody of that national, I almost said notoriety, of that kind of national stature, just in our own backyard as part of our group. We're so fortunate to have her. Yeah.
Anyway, so I hope we've kind of explained what our group is like and how we fit into the big picture of the story.
Yeah. Oh, and Barbara does puppets in her stories. She tells these great stories and has some little furry friends that help her.
wow.
Speaking of puppets, one of the featured storytellers at the Bay Area Storytelling Festival is Willie Claflin. And he tells stories with Maynard the Moose. And he loves to tell fractured storytellers. He is hilarious.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
and
you generally meet the second Monday of the month, except for July, and third Monday of the month, with the
Yeah.
exception of this coming
July
and August. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're welcome to join us like you did tonight. Either it's just a listener, or if you want to try something out, you're
Okay.
Mhm.
try to keep it 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it okay if it's under
Yes, yes.
5 minutes usually?
Yeah. I've taken a number of longer stories, folk tales, other things that are sometimes 20 some odd minutes, and found ways to edit and whittle them down to about 10 or 12 minutes. Partly because people don't always know what you leave out, but get it down to the essentials.
Mhm.
So that's that's also, an option. You said you've published. What do you write?
Well, my debut novel. called A Tiny Upward Shove. It was published in 2022 with Farrar, Straus and Giroux, and my I guess, I mean, it's definitely like literary, but also somewhat speculative. The narrator is a figure in Filipino folklore called the Aswang. But it's a then all other elements of it are sort of auto-fictive in that it's the narrative of a young woman who grew up in foster care in Los Angeles, but was murdered by a real life Canadian serial killer who happens to be a pig farmer. And
Wow.
so, but the narrator is yeah, so it's, but also it's at the heart of it, there's like a really sweet queer love story. So it's sort of like um but yeah, so that's my novel. But then I published a lot of nonfiction, and like I said, I'm a recovering journalist. I report on child fatalities within the child welfare system. And the next project I'm working on was my dissertation, actually, which is a fairy tale translation of child adaptation of case records of child fatalities within LA County, of open cases within the child welfare system. So not very light, but but fairy tales are a nice vehicle for maternal filicide and infanticide, and a lot of the sort of circumstances of the world mirror that of Grimm's. So
Mhm.
it makes for, so I mean, it's actually nice that I get to listen to other folklore and fairy tales from around the world with you all.
Well, thank you for joining us. I think we're probably going to call this meeting to a close.
Yeah.
Those people who are here, there are a few refreshments. Those of you who are on Zoom, I'm sorry you can't partake. But I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay. And Melissa, I was gonna say, having been through the whole dissertation process myself, you're currently working on yours?
No, this is I have my PhD, but I
Okay.
was able to get a publishing contract with my
Oh, okay.
so I'm publishing my dissertation,
Your
but
dissertation. Okay.
uh,
Okay.
but it's I think going to be slightly less academic,
Okay.
more sort of accessible.